6060973.
Just coming up on 10 minutes before 8, so to that meeting, high noon, taking place between the energy bosses, the Chancellor and the Business Secretary. Now, as three of the biggest bosses turn up, Shell, BP and Centrica, between them, they'll have earned £15 million in the last year. Should we let that figure hang in the air? £15 million. That's just for the bosses. I've not even talked about the profits. I think it's fair to say this will almost certainly help determine who will become the next leader of the Conservative Party and therefore the next Prime Minister, and I would have thought possibly shape the next general election. Both candidates, of course, are offering their particular visions or ways forward, was Rishi Sunak saying yesterday he'd rather lose than win on a false promise. What might he have meant by that? Well, Leader of the House of Commons, and obviously Conservative MP, Mark Spencer, is a prominent supporter of Rishi Sunak, joins me now. Can you give us a little more detail on this, Mr Spencer? Thank you for joining me. What does he mean by a false promise? Is this a bit of a dig at his rival? Good morning.
Well, I'm not sure. I think what Rishi's saying is that he wants to have an honest conversation with people up and down the country. There are huge challenges that we face, on a global sense, not least of all, Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine has caused huge ripples for food and energy markets around the world. That's going to be a very challenging situation for the country as we move forward. And I think he wants to have an honest conversation with people and say, look, there are some bumpy times ahead here. We'll step in and try and help where we can. But it's going to be a bit bumpy for the next couple of years.
So he wants an honest conversation. Presumably then Liz Truss wants a dishonest conversation.
No, I didn't say that at all.
No, I know you didn't, but I was just having a go.
The point I'm making is that Rishi's very much, an upfront person. He wants to be straight with people and to tell them how it is. And, that's one of the characteristics in him that I think is endearing and would make him a great Prime Minister.
There's a meeting taking place later today. The energy chiefs will be there, as will Kwasi Kwarteng and Nadim Zahawi. What do you think needs to come out of that, Mr Spencer?
Well, I think we do need those energy companies to focus on how they can assist, and try and remove some of those bumps that I'm talking about. There are huge challenges coming for people and their energy bills this autumn and this winter, and we need those energy companies working with us to try and solve some of those challenges if at all possible.
But in what way? In what practical terms are you talking about? What should they be doing?
Well, I think that's a decision for the Chancellor and a conversation for the Chancellor and the Business Secretary to have with them directly as to what they can deliver and what they could do. I mean, clearly they're making very huge margins at this moment in time, and I think they ought to be able to assist people and try and suppress those bills as much as physically possible. But that's a conversation for them to have directly with the Chancellor and the Business Secretary.
Would you support more windfall taxation?
Well, I wouldn't rule that out, certainly. I think it's certainly, we do need those companies, of course, to invest in the future as well, because what we need to do is we move forward over the next decade, make sure that we've got a balanced energy system of production, which not only is based on hydrocarbons, but also new green technologies as well.
Should there be an emergency budget for whoever does take over as the Prime Minister next month?
So I actually don't think that's that necessary. When you look at what Rishi did when he was Chancellor of the Exchequer, he actually put a lot of support mechanisms in place, which he was able to do without the necessity of an emergency budget. He was able to do that. I think certainly measures which you can introduce without an emergency budget.
If you come more broadly, is there a problem that one of the bosses here makes almost £11.5 million, Mr Spencer, at a time when, as you rightly reference, there will be people facing the autumn with nothing short of dread?
Well, that seems like a very large figure to me, and certainly on my salary and to my constituents, that feels like a large figure. But in the context of things, actually, when there's 65 million people in the country, it's 30 pence, 20 pence a person. So, I think actually there are bigger fish to fry here, which we can try and solve the challenges than to have a pop at the chief exec salary. I think actually, whilst it sometimes makes great politics, it actually doesn't affect people's bills, which we need to be focused on in the autumn.
But it's whether you, of course, use his product or not. You're still, to use your analogy, that we're all starting to have to fork out that amount of money. It does seem a vast sum, doesn't it?
Yeah, it's a big salary, but on the other hand, we want the very best people at the top of these companies that can help us solve the challenges that we face, that make the right decisions in terms of investment in our energy production in the future, and certainly help us to lower those bills if it's all possible. So the question shouldn't be about their salary; it should be about what are they going to do to help us.
When your Labour shadow, reminding listeners you're the leader of the House, this is Labour's Thangnam Debonair, when she says that the Labour Party talked about windfall taxes and the government fell in line, she claims, and then they talked about emergency budgets, noting that you're not a fan, but that another candidate is talking about a possibly emergency budget if she were to gain power. Thangnam Debonair is right, isn't it? You guys are following Labour now.
No, I mean nothing could be further from the truth. I think.
Well, Liz Truss, respectfully, sir, Liz Truss wants an emergency budget. You shake your head, sir. She does. She hasn't won yet. I appreciate you want windfall taxes. Thangnam is right.
No, they are a vacuum. When it comes to these sorts of policies, they are a complete vacuum. And time and time again, you look back through history, when the country's got into very difficult financial challenges, it is always the Conservative Party that has to sort out that challenge and make sure the country gets back on an even keel. I mean, some of that is inflicted by Labour governments of history, but actually it is always the Conservative Party that has to tidy up the economic challenge that the country faces, and that's why we're best placed to be able to deal with this huge global challenge when it comes forward.
Last couple of points, sir. I'm intrigued by a sign over your right shoulder which says sheep or leader. Are you in some way implying that Liz Truss is a you?
No. Well, it's my children taking the mickey out of my role as leader of the House of Commons. That's my children taking the mickey out of me, saying,
bless your children. They've obviously got a great sense of humour. Lastly, I hope you have for this final question as well. I don't know if you've seen photographs of Mr. Sunak. We all know that he's quite a wealthy individual. He seems to have a hole in his shoe. Has he heard of Timpson's, Mr. Spencer?
I'm sure that the honourable member, his colleague Edward Timpson, will be able to put him in contact with someone that can assist him with that challenge.
Grateful for your time. Thanks, Mark. Mark Spencer, Conservative MP and Leader of the House of Commons, appearing here on LBC, where it's 3 minutes before 8. Let's talk energy costs, energy prices. Lee in Brentwood. Lee, what are you going to tell me? Good morning.
Well, first of all, that gentleman there just showed how out of touch these people remain. They just continue to be. It's